Hello, my name is Drew Combs and I'm mayor of Menlo Park. It has been the tradition in this city that the mayor deliver a State of the City address as a standalone event during the closing months of their tenure as mayor. It's a tradition that we diverged from last year because of the pandemic. I'm excited that we're able to revive it, though more muted and scaled back than it has been in the past. While there have been great strides made to combat the spread and severity of COVID-19, the challenge that the virus and its variants continue to pose to the world and our community make it prudent for this tradition to take the form of a speech in which you participate via a video conferencing platform. My hope, though, is that your participation isn't limited to just watching me give a speech. At the end, I'll open it up to questions so that this moment can be a true dialogue. Of course, this tradition is modeled off of the State of the Union address delivered annually by the president. During that address, the president usually at some point states with some dramatic flair that the State of the Union is strong. While I wholeheartedly believe that the state of the city is strong and getting stronger, I want to take the opportunity presented with this speech to acknowledge the source of that strength, the people that make up this community, the residents who call Menlo Park home, the people who work for the city, the business owners who invest in the city and provide services to our community, and then employees at businesses small and large throughout the city. During the course of my 3 years on city council and my year as mayor, I've been left in awe by your strength and commitment to this community. As mayor, I'd like to take this opportunity to say thank you. When I assumed the mayorship, the city's operations were still much reduced and in a state of flux outside of those services that were critically important for infrastructure maintenance and safety. While the coda of my mayorship isn't happening during a complete return to normalcy that I had hoped, the city is operating near its pre-pandemic levels across many of its departments and services. But I want to step back for a moment to where we've come from and what we've come through. Because it is in this experience that the strength in the people of Menlo Park has been most evident. You made it a point to check in and provide assistance to your neighbors, especially those who were elderly and most at risk during this pandemic. You established informal support groups to provide help and support for each other. You established learning and childcare pods. You volunteered for vaccination drives. You donated to help those in your community who were in need. Over the course of my year as mayor and the entire pandemic, in fact, you've made it a priority to support small businesses in this community, many of which who have been hard hit by changing consumer behavior and pandemic-related restrictions. You've even established and supported fundraising drives to provide financial support to both small businesses and nonprofits in our community. Despite the pandemic, you, the residents of this community, have continued to be civically engaged, attending meetings, volunteering for commissions and committees, reaching out to advocate for the policies that were important to you, whether it was housing affordability, climate change, or pedestrian safety. During this past year, dozens of you have applied to and been appointed to city commissions and committees. We've made at least one new appointment to all of our city's commissions, and some commissions, such as Parks and Rec and Complete Streets, have seen an influx of new members. We've created 2 new resident-led committees to tackle redistricting and housing element outreach. We've been in a period where you could be forgiven for wanting to turn inward and just focus on the safety of your family and friends, or just wanting to prioritize your career. It's a period that has brought unprecedented stressors to our family and work lives. But the residents of Menlo Park have done just the opposite of turning inward. Over the course of this year, from my vantage, you've doubled down on helping your neighbors and making the city stronger. Another key part of our community is our city staff, which has gone above and beyond during my tenure as mayor and over the course of the whole pandemic. They've had to first go through the process of cutting back many public-facing services due to safety. This was then followed by developing new processes, protocols, and technology that allowed for us to continue city services, to continue to deliver city service with minimal impact, with minimal in-person interaction. Of course, there are some services such as policing that never went away, and others such as childcare that were brought back relatively quickly. Over the course of this year, as vaccinations have become more available, transmission rates have gone down, we've now turned to the process of more fully opening the city. When it comes to library and community services, this year we've safely reopened multiple facilities to indoor public access, including the main library, the Belhaven Branch Library, the Arriaga Recreation Center, and the Arriaga Family Gymnasium. Additionally, we've successfully transitioned services to temporary locations during the construction of the Menlo Park Community Campus. The Senior Center was temporarily relocated to the Arriaga Family Recreation Center and Main Library. The Belhaven Youth Center After School Care was temporarily relocated to portable facilities at Kelly Park. And recreation classes were temporarily relocated to the Belhaven Branch Library. It is also worth noting that during this period, we secured a $1 million grant from the California Department of Education to offset operation costs at the Belhaven Child Development Center, and secured a $350,000 grant from San Mateo County to enhance full day care childcare services at the center. In Public Works, significant progress was made towards securing the needed funding for the Safer Bay project in Menlo Park, which will provide sea level rise protection. The city played a role in getting a $50 million grant from the federal government for this project. The grant, which is still being finalized, will be combined with millions of dollars in matching funds from both PG&E and Facebook. Other noteworthy public works projects took place this year: the resurfacing of Willow Road with rubberized asphalt, and the renovation of the main library patio to include new seating. And last, but certainly not least, earlier this month, we broke ground and started construction on the new $45 million Menlo Park Community Campus in the Belhaven neighborhood, which is being made possible by funds from both the city and Facebook. Shifting to policing, over the course, of course, police personnel remained on duty 24/7 during the pandemic year, processing nearly 50,000 phone calls to our dispatch center and handling over 28,000 incidents. Also worth note, this year we hired a new police chief after an extensive recruitment process. We also re-added a record specialist position to assist with upcoming needs due to the Racial Identity Profiling Act. We applied for and received over $500,000 in state grants to support traffic safety, as well as alcohol and drug awareness. Technology upgrades have included rolling out new body cameras, replacing outdated tasers, the purchase of defibrillators for all patrol cars, and the addition of license plate readers to 3 patrol vehicles. As part of our efforts to reimagine the way we deliver policing services, we've established a council subcommittee to partner with Chief Norris. Along those lines, the police chief made a long-awaited presentation to the city council, which provided an update to the state of policing in Menlo Park and an overview of progressive policing changes that are in progress. The presentation also provided a look at the future of trust building, public engagement, and alternative response delivery when it comes to public safety services. I'm really excited and hopeful that we have in place all the needed pieces to make significant strides in this area. Forward-thinking leadership in the form of Chief Norris, an engaged city council that's willing to commit the needed resources, and police department personnel who are professional and community focused. Turning to community development, there have been a number of significant developments during the course of the year that are worth note. The city approved 3 residential projects in the Bayfront area, which are the first that implement the zoning district adopted as part of the Connect Menlo General Plan. The 3 developments total 923 residential units, of which 139 are dedicated to very low to moderate income households. The 3 projects will also incorporate community amenities that are worth as much as $20 million, including an urgent care clinic. This year, the city officially kicked off its housing element update, which includes planning the city's regional housing need allocation, an update to the city's safety element, and preparation of the city's first environmental justice element. The environmental justice element is an opportunity for the city to focus on members in our community who may have been historically underserved and are most vulnerable to environmental and health hazards. In February, the City Council approved $5.5 million of below market rate housing funds that allowed HIP Housing to acquire a 14-unit apartment building and convert these market rate units to deed restricted BMR rental housing. Currently, all the units are occupied by qualified low-income tenants. In May, the City Council authorized $1.2 million from the BMR Housing Fund to support Habitat for Humanity's proposal to create a home ownership preservation program. The program will assist low-income homeowners in Menlo Park with major repairs and rehabs that address acute safety issues. The program is scheduled to kick off next year. In October, the City Council approved $250,000 in American Rescue Plan funds to increase funding of the city's housing assistance program administered by Samaritan House. The program provides rental and mortgage assistance to qualified households related to the COVID-19 pandemic or other emergency circumstances. The program's initial $100,000 funding allocation assisted 32 families to remain stably housed during this time of financial hardship and economic instability. And earlier this month, the city issued a building permit for the construction by Mid-Penn Housing of a 140-unit, 100% affordable residential development located at 1345 Willow Road. The development replaces a decades-old 82-unit complex. The development includes a mix of units ranging from 1 bedroom to 3 bedrooms and will feature resident amenities such as a community room, an exercise facility, and after-school space. All of the units will be targeted to households at the 30 to 60% of the area's median income. Additionally, the new mixed-use development located at 556 Santa Cruz Avenue and 1125 Merrill Street, which houses Phil's Coffee, received final building permit sign-off, and MPK 22, a new 4-story office structure located on the Facebook campus, also received final building sign-off. Even though retail businesses have been challenging endeavors, it's worth noting that we've actually seen some new additions to our city's business landscape during this past year. In addition to Phil's Coffees, Pedigo Bikes opened, and there was the addition of a Wednesday's afternoon farmers market in downtown. I'll take this opportunity to also plug that our downtown tree lighting event will be returning after a 1-year hiatus. Join me on December 10th to light the holiday tree in Fremont Park. Switching back for a moment, though, to community development, probably one of the most significant developments when it comes to process improvements was that the transition to a fully electronic building permit application process from intake to issuance. Under the category of more general developments, this year the city launched a new website, finalized a new collective bargaining agreement with the Police Officers Association, and has made a shift from 100% remote meetings to hybrid meetings. I was able to run the most recent city council meeting from council chambers, while some of my colleagues and members of the public participated remotely. I'll point out that all of this has taken place while the budget has been balanced. On behalf of the residents of this community, I want to express my gratitude to the city staff for all the time and effort that has been necessary in achieving all of this. But while we reflect on all that has been accomplished, we should acknowledge that there are some challenges ahead for the city. There's an adage that challenges are really just opportunities. There's some truth to that, but sometimes challenges are just that, challenges. And at the top of those list of challenges is that we're still in a pandemic. And as the recent emergence of a new variant indicates, so much is out of our control. I've heard from a number of residents expressing frustration with the longer than normal timelines required for the planning and permitting process. The city's community development department, like a number of private sector businesses, has had to deal with reduced capacity and increased demand. In this area, we're committed to increasing capacity and looking for efficiencies where possible. Your feedback is welcome, and you should feel free to reach out to me directly. Speaking of personnel capacity, there are a number of key staff vacancies. Added to this mix will be some senior level staff transitions in the months ahead. This provides an opportunity for new voices and leadership, but it's important that the City Council does its part to ensure these transitions result in a future that reflects the city's workplace culture and is additive to our city's ability to deliver services to residents. I've also heard from a number of you that the downtown lacks the attention and investment from the city that it needs to be the vibrant and attractive hub that we all want it to be. I know that this is a priority of a number of my council colleagues, and I promise that in the months ahead, you'll be hearing more from us on these efforts. In closing, I'd like to thank my council colleagues for their support over the past 12 months and the faith that they had in me. I'd also like to thank the city staff, especially the city manager, Starla Jerome Robinson, for their assistance, guidance, and patience with me during my tenure as mayor. On a personal note, I'd like to thank my family for their love and support. My wife, Alexa, my daughter, Daly, and my son, Hyland. Speaking of family, there's been in my family an ongoing debate of sorts between my daughter, Daly, and I about whether it was a bigger deal that she started kindergarten this year or that I was mayor. Her reasoning was a little all over the place, but it kept coming back to this idea that for school, she got to go, for kindergarten, she went to school every day, while for me being mayor was a lot about sitting at home on my computer through long, boring meetings. I'm not sure of the logic of that reasoning, but it has caused me over the past few weeks to truly reflect on all that has changed during my tenure as mayor. I was selected as mayor while sitting at a makeshift desk in my bedroom. If I remember correctly, that was the place I thought the background voices of my kids would carry least. At that time, there was still a lot of uncertainty about the impact the pandemic would have on the city government. There was still concern about the financial constraints to the city and the burden of pandemic-related safety measures. It was an open question of whether the city would need to permanently scale back some of its programs or impose new limits to the role it played in the community. Tonight, just 12 months later, I'm able to give this address not from the quietest nook I could find in my home, but from the City Council's chambers. Of course, these chambers are mostly empty, but this is progress. And during this address, I was able to reel off a litany of ways in which you, the residents, have engaged the city during this period. I also listed a number of accomplishments across all of our departments that attest that the city hasn't shrunk from its traditional role or any of its pre-pandemic ambitions. This leaves me hopeful, and it should leave you hopeful. So I can't say conclusively whether being mayor of Menlo Park is a bigger deal than being a kindergartner at Laurel. But what I can say is that being mayor during this historic and challenging time has been an honor and a responsibility of which I'll always be immensely humbled to have been entrusted with. Thank you. With that, I'll now turn to our city clerk, Judy Heron, to accept any questions.
Thank you so much, Mayor Combs. So at this time, if any member of the public wishes to either provide comment or ask questions on tonight's State of the City address, please engage that hand feature in the bottom of your screen. If you're calling in, you can press *9. And it does look like we also have the chat feature available if you would like to utilize that. Thank you. So Pam Jones, would you like to come to the microphone?
Thank you for letting me say a word or two. Mayor Combs, I just want to say how I deeply appreciate the service that you've given to Menlo Park. I think you ran really good meetings. Keeping on target, with what needed to be done. And a lot can be said, a lot more can be said, but I do have a question, and that is, what positive thing stood out the most for you during this past year?
Thanks for the question. It's good to start off with softballs. I think the positive things have, I think, as I spoke to, been my interactions with the residents. Being mayor during a pandemic, those interactions have been a lot more limited than maybe in the past. But so they've been sort of really, so when they have occurred, they've been really impactful for me. And so, again, whether it's residents reaching out recently a lot about sort of concerns of pedestrian safety and how that can be best achieved, whether it is, people who have been advocating for the ways in which the city can act proactively in the context of climate change. I mean, some of those, like when those interactions have happened, like, right, some in person, some obviously a lot over VC. To me, that's what has been, I think, most impactful. And again, of course, all of those engagements and conversations weren't scenarios where there was an agreement, but I still could see, as I said, like that passion that people had, and even during a time when, like, it really didn't mean it, when people could easily turn in, they decided not to. They decided that, in fact, this was a time to be like really invested in their community, and so that will stand out for me. Hopefully that answered your question.
It did, and I want to follow that up with, if there was, do the one thing, so you don't have to think of a lot of different things, but if there was one thing that you could make sure happened during this next year, what would that be?
So it'll be, and again, it is something that the city manager has heard me talk a lot about, and so it is what I like to call a pet project. But for me, I think a lot of what and I'm going to get to that answer, a lot of what the city is about is those sort of services and engagements it has with residents in those services, of which are exclusively in the area of the local government, of what you expect from a local government. And to that end, for me, a big deal has been like our parks and rec infrastructure, and specifically for me, I've been committed to advocating for the renovation, for lack of a better word, of Willow Oaks Park. And so for me, next year, I don't think that gets completed next year, but to see additional significant progress on that, I think will be something that will be really important for me. And I know that's all in process. I'm not seeing something that is not on the radar and is, again, not happening, but that's the thing that has been that I definitely would like to see more significant progress on. And again, I know the city manager I'm a broken record about it. But again, like I said, I think it does go back to, for me, the value of the city is in those services that it does exclusively, and that there is a clear expectation from residents. And so, this is one of them.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Pam. So our next speaker will be Brielle Yannick.
Thank you.
Great, we can hear you. Thanks so much.
Is it my time to speak now?
Yes, please go right ahead.
Yes, I would like to thank our mayor for remembering what the true fundamental purpose is for his serving, and that is that you fill the potholes, you keep the lights on, you deal with the staff with grace and with humility. And I think that with all the temptations before you to go off and get distracted on issues that don't pertain to those things I just mentioned, you've done a remarkable job during a difficult time. And I and my husband, Steve Schmidt, would like to thank you very much for your service. Thank you. Thank you so much, Drew.
Thank you, Drew.
Thank you, Steve and Brielle. That means a great deal to me. It was just a quick backstory. It was 10 or something years ago when I got a call on my phone from a number I did not know. And for some reason, I decided to actually answer it. And on the other side of that call was Brielle, and she was asking me would I consider running for city council. And I did end up running, and of course I lost, but 10 years later, I'm here in council chambers by myself. And thank you, Steve and Brielle. And I've given you a lot of grief over the years for that call, but obviously it was a welcome call, and I'm glad that you made it, and I'm glad that I picked up.
Thank you. So again, we'd like to invite any member of the public who either has a comment or a question for our mayor to engage that hand feature in the bottom of your screen. If you're calling in from a landline or a cell phone, you can press *9. And we also have the chat feature available if you'd like to type something in the chat. Mayor Combs, I do have one here. What do you consider your greatest challenge as mayor?
My greatest challenge as mayor, I think, has been maybe one of my positive attributes, but there is a certain sort of deliberation to the government process, which has immense value, right? And it is not just theater or show. But is really part of the process of making sure that all stakeholders in the community are heard and engaged. For me, I sort of, though, if I see that I think what the end will be, I sometimes will say, well, let's get to that and let's deal with that reality. And so sometimes I think it is a challenge for me to stop and sort of take in that debate and that discussion. And so instead of sort of just getting to what the conclusion will be. And so that's a challenge that I think a personal challenge for me. I don't know if that was a personal challenge or a city challenge. I think so. I'll answer both ways. That was a personal challenge. I think as a city challenge, I think the city has a lot of the challenges that a lot of entities are facing now, whether they're in the private sector or whether they're in the public sector. And it is a future of really like so many unknown variables. Like, how does work look like in the future? How do you like sort of recruit people? How do you retain people and keep people? Because at the end of the day, that's really like, that's really the value of almost any sort of entity that is trying to do something. It's not, the real estate it owns are the objects that it may have some title or possession of. It is really the people that show up every day and are committed to what that entity or organization is trying to accomplish. And I think it's going to be a challenge for, like I say, the city and lots of other employers about like how it looks in the future, how you keep people committed, how you are both flexible, but then have certain benchmarks and standards that reflect your ability to deliver the services that you want to deliver. So I think that again, and I think that's going to be a challenge for lots of entities and especially the city.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Combs. So again, inviting anyone to engage that hand feature, bottom of your screen, *9 if you're calling in, or if you'd like to continue to utilize the chat, you can do that as well. So Mayor Combs, has the city council approved the Willow Village project?
No. and that I will sort of say, this isn't an official council meeting, of course, but the disclaimer, I am personally recused from the Willow Village project because I work for Facebook, but that project is far from approved. There are still many processes, reviews that it must go through.
Great, thank you. The next one is actually related to the SRI project. What is the status of the SRI project?
I will turn to the city manager to provide a very precise update. I think have official plans been submitted for that?
An application has been submitted and it's still under internal review.
Okay.
So there will be 18 to 24 months at least of further evaluation.
Great. So, and yet in that project, like lots of large projects will include a number of sort of community based engagement forums and there will forums, and it will probably also be seen by more than one of the city's commissions, probably certainly the planning commission and possibly the housing commission, and maybe given some of the amenities that are being proposed. Again, there might be some other commissions that will review it before it, of course, then comes to the city council. So again, I think, yeah, it's obviously a really sort of generational level impactful project. And I think as you will see in the months ahead, it will go through a review that reflects that impact.
Thank you so much, Mayor Combs. So again, just opening it up to any member of the public who might have a question or comment. You can raise that hand feature in the bottom of your screen, press *9, or engage the chat feature as well. Okay, we have another one coming in. Can you give us an update on the Creek Flood Control Project?
Yeah, so that project is the main agency is the San Francisco Creek Joint Powers Authority, of which I sit as a representative of Menlo Park. Councilmember Taylor is the alternate. There are also representatives on that board from the County of San Mateo, Valley Water, East Palo Alto, and Palo Alto for background. And again, the current flood protection measures for Reach 2, which include a replacement of Pope Chaucer Bridge and widening of the creek in parts to account for what is the flood of record, which I believe occurred in 1998, and at that level, it was a 70-year flood. A 70-year flood. The current the project has gone through an EIR, and one of the challenges has been funding. And as it has gone through this process, the funding has been a component that has never been completely clear. And so one of the things that was a part of the latest part of this process was that the Army Corps of Engineers was engaged, because with the Army Corps of Engineers comes the availability of federal funding. And there was a sort of, I forget the exact name of the project, but it's a level of project at or like under $10 million, which requires less approval. And one of which is that, for instance, it won't have to be approved by Congress. And so the Army Corps has been brought in because those funds would provide much of the funding gap that is currently the reality for the project. So though the Army Corps has their own process, like when they get involved in projects, and it may include what is essentially a type of EIR that they undertake. And so that's the process of which the Army Corps is kicking off. I don't know the specific timeline of that process, but it is, I think, still the goal to have this project kicked off in the next couple of years. And so that would be like, again, the channel widening and the replacement of the Pope Chaucer Bridge. One of the key aspects of this also, though, is that the Newell Bridge needs to be replaced before the Pope Chaucer Bridge can be replaced, because we can't allow additional sort of flow capacity under Pope Chaucer and then lead to Newell, and then it all sort of starts flooding there. And so that project is exclusively a Palo Alto City project, and so there are dependencies that are also in place. And so I don't know if that provided an exact answer or there was a lot of information there, but so that's where things are. I do think that there has been significant movement regarding that project, and I do think it, again, there's been significant movement. On the flip side, I do think it is important. This has been a discussion and a debate, especially in the Willows, for some time now, of concern about like what the flood protection project or project will actually like entail, like, right, and that because of a lot of the natural beauty of the creek. That residents in the Willows and throughout Menlo Park, see a great deal of value in. There is concern about changes to that, and I think that those concerns are legitimate. One of the concerns that have been expressed in the past is a concern about flood walls as a way to achieve, flood control and protection, and that's something I have been, opposed to, and is not a part of this project, and is not a part of what has, what is being looked at now. Certainly the Army Corps of Engineers will come back with their own ideas, and that will be a dialogue. But for me, again, like I say, I do think I am supportive of a lot of the flood control measures as part of Reach 2, but remain opposed to flood walls.
Thank you so much, Mayor Combs. So at this time, I would like to invite Dina Levin.
Hello, good evening, Mayor Combs, and sorry I missed the beginning of the presentation. Well, glad that they are recorded. I have a question about there is a federal infrastructure funding that was approved, and there are a couple of projects that have been city priorities. One is the undercrossing of the Caltrain tracks at Middle, and presumably some of the funding may be applicable to that. And I'm wondering what the city may be doing and what the time frame may be to pursue that. And then secondly, larger project of the grade separation, there are pots of federal funding that are called out that could potentially be used for grade separation. And what might the city be doing with regard to the available funding on both of those different projects?
Yeah, Adina, thanks for that. Those questions, I appreciate them. I'll sort of start off, and certainly if the city manager wants to add or correct, she certainly should. And I think first to separate out, I think that when it comes to the middle undercrossing, like the main barrier there has not necessarily been funding. Right now, grade separation, that's all about funding. that is nothing about like funding being an obstacle. But with middle, I mean, there have been property acquisition challenges that have been key, and I think sort of stalling some of the progress in that project. There has also been sort of engagement with Caltrain, which I'll say probably hasn't been at times as cooperative as we would have liked. Certainly they have their own priorities, which we clearly respect. And so I'd say that like there are sort of political challenges and just sort of logistical challenges to middle, but it will be done. I have no doubt about that. Regarding grade separation, I'll just say, obviously, those we are interested in grade separation. We haven't, as a community, come to a conclusion about exactly how that looks for us. There's been, we still haven't settled whether, whether something like a viaduct has been, conclusively ruled out. I don't think that decision has been made completely. And when it comes to grade separation, a sort of more hybrid approach, what are the crossings that we would prioritize? So I think that those are decisions that we as a city are specifically, I won't even put this in the city, I would say the city council needs to make, that they haven't, I think, made yet. But maybe, this possibility of a pot of money will provide, the needed sort of kick to get us going. And so, but what I would say when it comes to grade separation, I think what has been sort of disappointing is that along the peninsula is that this has really been approached in silos. And in each community looking at just sort of its portion or segment of the rail line and the impacts at its crossings, and not looking at the full sort of the full line. And I do think that is going to probably be like a necessary element for us to really be able to, as a region, avail ourselves successfully of a lot of the federal funds that are towards infrastructure that are being made available. So and certainly think Menlo Park is willing to play its part in that going forward. I will say, obviously, in a few days I won't be mayor, and I'm not on the rail subcommittee. But I think that one, again, like I said, I do think that we as Menlo Park have to decide what we want as far as grade separation. And I do think we need to sort of make an effort to do that in concert with our neighbors, both our near neighbors and our neighbors who are not so near. Because I do think that, again, when it comes to competing successfully for federal funds, especially large federal funds, I think having your project button up is key. When we look at sort of the FEMA funding for Safer Bay, which again hasn't been completely finalized, but looks incredibly likely to the tune of, again, $50 million. There was just, it was really a project that was sort of packaged up for the federal government in a really sort of precise and great way. And it came with, again, funds from the private sector, clearly defined project, clearly defined need, stakeholders that were aligned. And I think that, again, like something like that needs to be repeated for us to be really successful going forward. But also, again, like have the opportunity for the city manager to add something.
Well, I think you did a great job of summarizing. I would just add that the city just reapplied to the state's grade separation priority list. And the CPUC will announce rankings early next year. And being on that list is critical to receiving funding. So just another step in the right direction.
So thanks for that question, Adina.
Thank you, Mayor Combs. So it does look like we've got no more questions in the chat. No other hands are raised.
Well, I'll take that as an opportunity to again say thank you. As I know this isn't. I've got a couple more weeks as mayor, but I think it was literally, I think almost like 10 years ago that my wife and I first moved here, and if someone I could have never imagined quite being mayor, but it has really been for us. Our time in Menlo Park has been a great ride, of which we have been incredibly humbled, and of which our lives have been incredibly enriched with, of course, 2 kids who you may have heard in the background this time around. And so I think for me, it has been really an opportunity to be able to give back in some small way with my service, first on the Bike Commission and then on the Planning Commission, and now on City Council and in a year as mayor, because again, like I really do believe that the city and the community, the people, of course, is what I'm talking about, have given us and enriched our lives so much. So with that, thank you. I wish you guys all a happy holiday season.